The Oregon Ducks are a well-oiled machine sitting at the top of the college football world right now, and only the Penn State Nittany Lions sit between them and capturing a Big Ten championship in their very first season in the Big Ten Conference.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
The last time the Oregon Ducks and the Penn State Nittany Lions met, that was also a postseason game in the 1995 Rose Bowl. That was the year of the pick for the Oregon Ducks. Kenny Wheaton's gonna score! Kenny Wheaton's gonna score! It was the last year for Rich Brooks as the head coach of this Ducks team before Mike Bellotti took over the program in the 1995 regular season. And for the Penn State Nittany Lions, this was one of the very best teams in the history of their program. They were only a couple of years in to their Big Ten membership when they had this team in the 94 regular season and this 1995 Rose Bowl. They had two of the top four in the Heisman voting with quarterback Kerry Collins. Kajana Carter went absolutely nuts, over 1,500 yards that season, 23 touchdowns. You had Bobby Ingram, who went over 1,000 receiving yards that season, shared a national title with Nebraska, who had a great team with Tom Osborne there in the mid-90s, of course, in that 1994 season. But let's fast forward to this matchup. Let's fast forward to the Big Ten championship game on Saturday night, the first of its kind. The top two teams, instead of division winners, going at it in Indianapolis. Number one, the 3.5-point favorite for the Oregon Ducks. The over-under on this game, just a half a point shy of that 50 mark. It's going to be Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, Jenny Dell, and the great team at CBS bringing this one to you. I see one thing, one position group really in common when it comes to this game for Oregon and for Penn State, and I think that position group is going to be ultra important. The defensive line domination has been on display for the Nittany Lions and the Ducks, certainly all season long. I think the big question and the big talking point as it comes to how successful can either of these defensive lines be, I think both of them have to get this offense, the opposing offense and the opposing quarterback, out of rhythm. Let's start first with Oregon and what they can do up front on the defensive line and what they're facing in Penn State offensively. We've seen it the last 2 years. Last year against Ohio State and against Michigan for Drew Aller. This year against Ohio State, when opposing defenses and opposing defensive lines are able to get into the face of Drew Aller, are able to hit Drew Aller, are able to attack this pass protection, Drew Aller becomes a little bit different. You get him off schedule. You get him out of rhythm, and this Penn State offense is very different. Now, I don't think the blame is totally on 15 and blue and white. I think that's part of the equation, is they don't have the talent, the athleticism, the explosiveness, whatever, over that they're at wide receiver to help out Drew when he's a little bit under pressure. And although Drew is definitely more mobile this season, he does not have the mobility a lot of times to escape these pressure-packed situations when opposing defensive lines are getting pressure on 15 and blue and white. And when I look at this thing for Penn State and their defensive line, you need to find a way to get Dillon Gabriel out of rhythm. This Oregon offensive line, both offensive lines really, but the Ducks have done a great job at protecting Dillon Gabriel all season. They've done a great job at protecting him lately, certainly as well. Josh Connerly on one side is Johnny Cornelius on the other side. When you have tackles like that, you're usually going to have a lot of time to throw the football. You're usually going to have a lot of time to decipher the secondary, certainly down the field. So Penn State needs to be able to get in the face of Dillon Gabriel. They need to get him moving. But when you talk about the movement of Dillon Gabriel as opposed to the movement of Drew Aller, Dillon Gabriel's got some scoot in him. Dillon Gabriel has shown us when the pressure is coming, one, he's a very experienced, he's a cool customer back there. That's what experience will get you, how many snaps and years that he's been on the college football scene. But we've seen him be able to escape pressure, create rollout to the outside, or create plays with his legs. So Dillon has to have the awareness when he sees the rush coming, and the rush with Dennis Sutton, with Abdul Carter, with Zane Durant and company up the middle, like the rush can come pretty quick. So he's got to be able to decipher that really quick and to be able to get out of there. And of course, for Penn State, you need to shorten the time that these routes have to develop, certainly down the field. Personally, I think Oregon is better suited to handle the great defensive line on the other side more than Penn State is. I already mentioned their tackles and their pass protection and how good it has been this season. It's crazy because both of these offensive lines have been great at protecting the quarterback this season. Both of these teams, top 2 in the Big Ten, right? They're number 1 and number 2 in least sacks allowed per game. They're both top 15 in the country, so they've been really good in pass protection this season. Both these teams, of course, have faced the Ohio State Buckeyes this season. Penn State gave up 2 sacks, Oregon with a goose egg, right? So the proof is in the pudding of what these offensive lines have been able to do. But circling back to my point, I think that this Oregon offensive line, compared with the mobility of Dillon Gabriel, has a better chance to have success in what the Nittany Lions are doing on the defensive front. When I look to the other side at the Penn State Nittany Lions, this is not as good of a group, I think, in general, when fully healthy on the O-line as compared to the Oregon Ducks, but this is a group that is not fully healthy, certainly to begin with. The great redshirt freshman tackle Anthony Donkow is out, a long-term injury. He will not play in this game and maybe other playoff games certainly down the road. That hurts. Now, Nolan Rucci, 5-star guy, transferred over from Wisconsin. I'm not sure. In fact, I am very sure, I should say. He has not lived up to that 5-star potential, but he is a solid player in there for the Nittany Lions. He ain't seen edges like this. He has not seen talent on the defensive line, certainly like this. So I think Oregon can have success on the edges. I think they can have more success on the defensive line going up against the Nittany Lion offensive line than vice versa. But this is going to be a challenge for Oregon up front to be able to contain the speed and power that Dennis Sutton and Carter certainly provide off of the edge. Offensively, for both of these teams, I think they want to look different. Let's just put it that way. Let's start first with the Nittany Lions from State College. Pound the rock, Penn State. I've said this a lot about Penn State this season. They have controlled the tempo. They have been methodical, and I think that's what you want to do against this Oregon team. Look, I know it's not going to be easy to be able to run the football. I talked a lot about the edges, the Burchin, Mateo, Tatum Tuioti, guys like that coming off of the edge for the Oregon Ducks, but that middle, they got some beef up there, man. With Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, those are some big boys, and those are some big boys that can move. Those are some big boys that can certainly wreak some havoc up front for the Oregon Ducks. But I think that this is a Penn State team. They've got to try to slow down the game. They've got to try to control the tempo. Keep the Oregon offense off the field. Methodical drives. Get that run game going. Like I just kind of outlined, I think it's going to be tough to be able to run up the middle. They certainly have to try, certainly have to keep that going, but I think it might be bouncing this thing to the outside, creating explosive plays in the run game on the perimeter, and of course the creativity with Andy Kotelnicki is what might give Penn State an advantage, certainly in this game. The Nittany Lions have ran the ball really well. They're second in the Big Ten, only behind Iowa this season in rushing. Nick Singleton, 733 yards and 7 touchdowns. Katron Allen, 698 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think Andy Kotelnicki needs to throw out all of the options in the run game. He needs to get very diverse. He needs to get very creative on the formations and try to, we talk about that window dressing that they do with motion pre-snap. He needs to try to do that to be able to maybe confuse Oregon and what they're doing on the other side of the ball. Bo Perbula, need to get him involved. Of course, Tyler Warren. I talked to Baby about their passing game with Drew Aller and maybe the matchups at wide receiver. They need to obviously get him involved in the pass game against a safety, against a linebacker. That would be a big matchup advantage in the throw game for the Nittany Lions. But when it comes to the run game, we've seen what kind of a weapon Tyler Warren can be when he catches a snap, when he's lining back up there in that shotgun formation. I think we're going to see a lot of 44 taking snaps in this game. I really do. He's been very effective when he gets a lot of momentum. When he's able to really turn the corner, he's shown the ability to finish a lot of runs and run with a full head of steam. We talked about Singleton. We talked about Allen, certainly in this game. Break contain. Now, this is a little bit different, but you looked at what Damon Williams was able to do early in that game against Washington. He was able to get outside, right? He was able to get around the containment of these edge guys and these defensive ends, and he was able to create plays that way down the field. I think Penn State might look to getting to the outside, see if they can create some explosive plays in the run game to be able to keep these drives moving. The thing is, if this Oregon rush defense, with that defensive line that I talked about in this great linebacker group with Bryce Betcher, with Jeffrey Bassa and Devin Jackson and Justin Jacobs, and the list goes on and on. They got a lot of depth at that linebacker position. I think it's going to be tough to run the football in this game. As I mentioned, that's why getting to the outside is important. But if Oregon is able to stop that in the middle, and now Penn State has to resort to the throw game, that is not where they want to be, because they don't want to be in a track meet with the Oregon Ducks, which leads me into my offensive bullet point for said Oregon Ducks. I think they need to open it up. Where Penn State maybe wants to pound the ball, I think Oregon wants to open it up through the air in this football game. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Penn State to run, Oregon to run the football against the Penn State front. I could see Oregon's run game being very similar to how they ran the ball against Ohio State, where maybe it gets a little bit stronger over time, and over time it gets better and better, and you're able to kind of break open those runs. But maybe early in the game, it isn't as successful. I see a lot of advantages for Oregon opening it up, getting all of their speed and all of their explosiveness on the perimeter, and matching up against Penn State's secondary. I think that's an advantage that the Oregon Ducks can certainly take advantage of it. Now, Penn State does have two all-conference players in the secondary. A.J. Harris over there at corner. Jalen Reed has been playing that nickel spot this season for Penn State. But when you match up Tez Johnson, especially in the slot, I think they can get very creative with Tez. If they can find a way to motion him and get open, I think he could have a lot of success. And then you look at the X and the Z. I mentioned A.J. Harris is an all Big Ten corner on one side, but the other side, whoever it is, whether it's Evan Stewart or whether it's Trayshawn Holden on that side, I think that they could have a big-time day in this game. Because when you've taken a look at Penn State's challenging games this season, look early in the season, I know that was a long time ago against Bowling Green, but they were able to move the football through the air. You look, even Ohio State and Minnesota. Look, I know neither of those teams threw for over 200 yards in those specific football games, but they showed the ability to move the ball through the air against these Penn State defensive backs. I think Oregon, if they overload the formation with a ton of weapons, and you know the usual suspects that Oregon has, of course, Terrence Ferguson over there at tight end could create some issues certainly as well, and this all relies, kind of coming back to that defensive line and the offensive line, this all comes back to the pass protection. If Dylan Gabriel has time to throw, I think that they're going to look for explosive plays early on in this game, because I mentioned the track meet style with Oregon. If they want to get up and down, they want to go up tempo, they want to create those types of plays down the field. If that's the type of game that Will Stein wants to play, I think it's going to be tough for Penn State to be able to combat that, where they want to play a little bit slower. They want to play a little bit more methodical. If Oregon gets up early in this game, I think it's going to be tough for the Nittany Lions to come back. I think this all comes down to which type of football game is this going to be? Is it going to favor Penn State? I know Penn State can hit some explosive plays down the field, but is it going to come down to more of what Penn State wants to do and how they want to be a little bit more physical? Or are the Oregon Ducks going to be able to get over the top and create those big plays that they're known for with Gabriel and Johnson and Stewart and Holden and those guys certainly going over the top? All right, it is prediction time for the Big Ten championship game. It is the last prediction for a Big Ten versus Big Ten, maybe a scheduled Big Ten versus Big Ten game, because could see certainly Big Ten versus Big Ten in the college football playoff. I think that this one could be fairly close and fairly defensive early on in this game. I could see something like Oregon 14, Penn State 10, certainly at the half. But when it comes to a four-quarter game, I just don't think Penn State can keep this Oregon offense in a bottle for 60 minutes. I know that's the game that they're going to try to play. I just don't think that they can play that type of game. I think eventually Oregon is going to be able to get explosive over the top. Remember, Ohio State, which a lot of people, including myself, they view Ohio State as a better defense than Penn State. They put up 32 on them. But I think the Nittany Lions, I think Penn State is going to be ready to play. I think they're going to have a good game plan approach in this game against the Oregon Ducks. And then when I look at Oregon defensively against Penn State offensively, I talked about how I believe that their defensive line can have an advantage over Penn State's offensive line. I think that they're going to get into the face of Drew Aller. I'm not sure how much success that he's going to have during this game. I think it all really comes down to how successful is Tyler Warren. How much can they get the ball into the hands of Tyler Warren really depends how successful the Nittany Lions can be in this game. Final score, I've got the Oregon Ducks 31 and the Penn State Nittany Lions 17. Just like I predicted at the beginning of the season, I've got the Ducks year one marching into the Big Ten and winning the Big Ten championship. Those are my thoughts. That is my picks. I want to hear what you guys think. Leave all of your score predictions in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.